And we are restarting with the presentation by Anthony. Anthony, now I'm going to pronounce your
Don't, it's too dangerous.
Colclough.
Colclough.
Sorry, can you repeat?
It's Colclough, but it's very unphonetic. It's a dangerous territory.
Colclough. Okay. Okay, thanks a lot. Okay, so we are going to listen to you. Anthony, I don't have a very short bio, so I just say that you come here you are an urban expert, and you come to represent Eurocities and talk how data is so important in the Eurocities perspective and the citizens' perspective. Okay, so go ahead. Very, very pleased to have you here. It's an honor. Yeah.
Very glad to be here. Thanks so much for inviting me. It's great to hear these presentations and to be among them. Now, can you see my slides?
Yes, we can. We can see your screen. Yeah.
Okay, super. I just briefly introduce myself. Indeed, I'm Anthony Colclough, and I'm coming here from Eurocities. It's a network of European cities, 200 cities at the moment. And we collaborate in different domains: environment, migration, and in this case, knowledge society, which is all things data and digital. And I'm going to be speaking about business to government data sharing, because we've recently worked together with the cities in our Knowledge Society Forum to formulate a statement because of the upcoming Data Act. So why do cities want private sector data? I mean, I suppose everyone wants data these days, but to clarify cities' motivations, one point is to enforce regulations, increase efficiency, and to improve services that they deliver to people in the cities. A nice example is Airbnb. At the moment, many cities have trouble getting the data that they want from Airbnb. One obvious reason they want the data is to make sure that people are paying their taxes, but they also want it because they want to make sure that people are abiding by the safety regulations in the area and the fire codes. And this is becoming more and more of an issue, as you can imagine. So at the moment, there are many cities in which some poor person is paid to sit behind the computer and to start to scroll through all the listings in the city and check each one and see if it's provided a little registration number, and if they haven't got the appropriate number, to contact them and see if they have it and haven't put it up, and then contact Airbnb and ask Airbnb, can they please remove the listing? And then they wait for Airbnb to respond to them. And if Airbnb do decide to respond and remove the listing, then this person immediately puts it up under a different pseudonym. So very frustrating, laborious, and I think you'll agree, inefficient process. And that's just one example. So cities need this data they want collaboration from these large companies to ensure that things are done according to regulations, and that everything that is collected, or the data that is collected, is maximally used to improve the well-being of the people in the cities. Data is also something that can be used to stimulate creativity, and the cities, many have and would like to have more, a position of data intermediary. So as someone that works, an organization that works between companies, civil society, other organizations and citizens to share data and open data. A nice example of where this has been pretty successful is in Vilnius. They have lots of really excellent open data policies. And one of the results is Trafi, which is an app that combines public and private data. That is to say, data generated by the city and data shared with the city by public companies, by private companies. And Trafi takes this and creates an app for traveling by various routes. And now their app is so successful that their team has been subcontracted by companies like Volkswagen and Google. So you have these companies releasing, big companies releasing data, the city sharing the data, and that innovation then getting funneled back into the bigger company. So you have this virtuous circle that can be created when data is shared in an open and transparent fashion. Another nice example is from our Sharing Cities project, the digital social market. So this is an app developed by the city that takes data about, well, people decide to download the app and share their data. And then it takes data about, for example, if they use the public bicycle sharing to go to work rather than their car, or if they bought something in a local organic store rather than the big chain store, it gives them points, and those points can be used for things like funding more bicycle lanes in the city, or for funding the local school, a local school competition. So these are just some different ways that cities either use data themselves or encourage local organizations to innovate and experiment with data that they've been responsible for opening up. There are lots of ways of sharing data. Three big ones that are used at the moment are data with cities and companies are data donorship, purchasing data, and data sharing obligation clauses. So either the company says, don't worry, look, we're happy to give you some of this data, or they say, well, you can have this data at a price, or they say, okay, you forced us through regulation, either local or national, to, or indeed through contracting and tendering, you forced us to share the data. And I should specify that, I mean, we're talking about all sorts of companies, whether it be, you know, the Googles and mega companies of the world, or whether it be the private company that's been tendered or contracted to carry out services in public transport or waste collection, you know, that are effectively, their boss is the city, but often we find that they're not sharing the data with their employer. So there are issues with each of these modes of data sharing. One is transparency. We've heard it mentioned a lot already. Cities don't know what data companies have often, and so it's hard for them to determine what should be shared, or to know what's going to be optimal for them to try and get their hands on. This leads to the cities taking up quite a passive role. It's the companies that know what's going on, and it's they that decide what to share, which can obviously be an issue if there are things that would be very useful, but the company would rather keep hold of. It also means you get a lot of inappropriate data. So data may be aggregated at the national or the regional level, meaning that, okay, it's shared with the cities, but they can't use it to determine what's actually happening in their city with any reasonable certainty. There's also the issue of limited use. So it could be, especially under the first two, the payment or the donorship models, that the city receives data, but on condition that, for example, it doesn't disclose it to other parties. Well, what the city wants to do, or many cities want to do, is to open up the data and use it to fuel local innovation, or maybe to transfer it to different departments or own subsidiaries of the city. And these clauses that come on top of it make the data effectively quite useless. The other issues with limited use could be simply the format that it's provided in, its legibility for city, legibility by the city through their modes of interpreting and processing data. However, you might say, well, then just mandate it, make it legal, make it necessary, or put it in your tender to force them to share it. Well, many cities are doing that, but the issue is that creating these obligations is quite costly. It requires a lot of time to figure out what the obligation should be. And again, what data does the company have that they want to get their hands on? A lot of time, a lot of money, but also a lot of expertise that's not necessarily incumbent in cities at the moment, to figure out how this needs to be structured and worded, these data agreements. And also monitoring is something extraordinarily difficult. Even if the cities do correctly construct these obligations, it's very hard for them to know if the company is keeping up their side of the bargain, especially again with these large companies when you're a small city. Now, the best results are the ones that come from shared objectives. So for any of these different methods to be effective or really effective, the ideal circumstance is when the city, the public authority, and the organization or company are sharing data around a common goal. Many companies have these goals around sustainability or creating social value. And when those align with the city's goals and they're sharing data in order to reach a stated objective in this domain, that's when you really see things moving well. So a lot of it is about structuring goals and objectives and making sure that they can be aligned. The issue isn't always the companies. There are some things city side that we need to think about. It's not infrequent that city data is not of the highest quality, maybe inexpertly formatted. There can be issues with consistency. There's a lot of bad data that's generated in cities in a kind of an ad hoc manner, and that makes them maybe not such interesting partners in terms of data sharing for companies. So we definitely need better processes in cities and better internal structure, and that's something that needs to be built up through improved capacity, which is what we're working on in Eurocities. What we would like is for all the data that's gathered in the public sphere, so all the data that's gathered in the normal course of activity in the public, that it should be made open and that it should be used only in the public interest. So that means both that obviously in an anonymized and GDPR compliant fashion, it should be accessible not just to the city, but open to anyone that wants to make use of it. And that it should be employed only in the interest of people. Well, what is the public interest? It's an interesting question and not one that I propose to answer today. Different member states have different definitions. And unfortunately, a lot of those definitions don't really consider the needs at the local level. Some things that cities would see as key for public interest would be education, security, postal services, telecoms, transport, housing, things like that. But what we don't have and what cities need or desire is a EU-wide agreed definition that considers their local needs. Obviously, this definition should be co-developed, so together with cities and other stakeholders, organizations. And the primary goal should be to define a minimum set of data categories that companies are obliged to share. And also to define when that data should be shared and under what circumstances. For example, many cities would prefer to have data made available to purchase, but it should be mandatory for companies to allow that data to be purchased and to explain what data they have available. In certain circumstances, for example, a public health pandemic, the idea is that there should also be rules in place to compel companies to quickly, efficiently share data for free that can combat public disasters and emergencies, as we've seen cropping up more and more. It's also super important that we have clear liability and accountability. You can't have cities writing to the general email address of Airbnb or Google or whatever, trying to send a fax to YouTube. We need to have it clear who's responsible for what in terms of what the companies have to do and what they have to account for, but also who within the company. So we need a nominated data steward. That's a position we'd like to see opened up in companies so that there's a contact point who can be identified and who cities can liaise with to discuss, to purchase, and to exchange data. So business to government data sharing, it's complex, it's resource intensive, it's costly, and sadly, it's often ad hoc. So it's not done in a consistent manner. And many companies are simply not interested in sharing their data with cities. And And it's hardest for medium and small cities. So your Parises and your Londons, they do really great things with data, and they don't have as much issue collaborating or compelling companies to share as your smaller cities around Europe, for whom it's really a challenge. However, if we do get this going, if we get the right obligations in place, if we get the right legislation in place through the upcoming Data Act coming from the European Commission, if we get the right attitude in place, and if we can align our activity around shared objectives, then cities will be able to facilitate a local data-driven innovation ecosystem that is beneficial. As I said, it's a virtuous circle that's beneficial for the people living in the cities, the visitors to the cities, for the local companies and economic ecosystem, and then also in the long run for the companies that are sharing the data themselves, because they benefit from an open pool of data, which is a resource for them as well. So that's the future we'd like to see, and I hope that it's one that will manifest in the coming years. Thanks very much, and I'd love to hear any questions.
Thank you very much, Anthony. It's great presentation. Now, questions from the audience or questions from the panel to Anthony, please. And this exciting theme of data and the cities, the smart cities.
Cities trying to be smart, but yeah, needing knowledge first.
Okay, if there aren't any yet, I may ask one or two. That thing about the open data, the open access. This open access relates mainly to business, right? Because I've been looking at the data. Not at the data, but okay, let's imagine Lisbon, okay, and I read there's there's open data in these and that domains, but in fact that data isn't for the common citizen. It's a question to you. The open data, the data that are available, it would be potentially for everyone interested in that data. But in fact, it isn't, because the normal citizen doesn't even know how to handle that stuff. Or what? Okay, it's open, and then what?
Sure.
So smart cities say, tell citizens, we have the data, the open data, we share the data with everyone, with all of you. Okay, and then what about it? What do I do with this data? Okay, that's a question to you.
No, it's a great question. And so you're completely right. So ideally, and first of all, what cities want and what we would like to see is the data being completely open to everyone, including citizens, to produce these data sets which anyone can access. However, there's definitely the so what factor, and I guess that's where we hope that innovators will step in, because a lot of this data is not useful until you make it useful. And so the hope is that, for example, again in Vilnius, they're using these, I think I wrote about it, these neuroanalytic cameras. Now, they're getting data, who is happy, who is sad, and they create this website which has the happiness index of the city, which is updated live every 3 seconds. Now, that's okay, fine in itself, but what could it be used for? Well, it could be used for shops to determine what the mood is in their area. It can be used for people who want to protect cultural heritage, to prove that people are walking more slowly, are doing more shopping, are more cheerful and less stressed in culturally in beautiful places that have cultural value. So the data in of itself is nothing, but the idea is that by making it available but the city can't say, well, this person's going to do something great with the data and this person's not going to have any idea, right? The idea is to conjure up this open innovation ecosystem. So by making it available to everyone, we give everyone the opportunity to make something of the data and to create from it something that will be useful to other people.
Yes, yes, I understand that, and that's what happens. But I think that from a participatory point of view, people should have. Of course, you have to have a goal when you go and you are going to deal with a certain amount of data. You have to know what you want, what's your purpose. Going to read that and what and how it can be eventually useful for you. If I want to make a proposal of a waste management of cooking oil, I have to go and see, okay, what amounts, if they have this data, what is the amount of cooking oil that is bought by citizens, how is it disposed, if it is disposed or not. I must say the cooking oil thing is an old issue that I think should be handled in Lisbon, but this is a parenthesis. So I have this purpose, and if I want to make something or a proposal to deal with this issue, or if I have a small company and I want to make a small business of collecting the food cooking oil, okay, that's useful. But what I say is for the common citizen, and this should be part of the literacy. I'm just being very utopic, but people should be made aware. Okay, there's this data. What is this data? This data is this, and that belongs to those domains. So if you have any suggestions, any business you want to develop, etc., you can, you see, because just saying there's a set of open data, okay, it's good for those that know what it is and how to make use of it. That's all I have to say for now. But I think it's great once the ethical issues and the privacy issues are solved, are not there. I think it's a great thing for the management of the city and for the well-being of the citizens. I firmly believe that.
Yeah, and can I just say, I think you're completely right. And let me briefly say, there's a couple of cities that have really great practices in this domain. So one of them is Rotterdam. And Rotterdam, it's about engaging with civil society. So talking to, I think they're working with different cultural venues, like a rock club that's been open for 50 years, or breakdancing groups and things like that. And they're working with them to help them create open data from their own resources, and also to access the data that's provided by the city archives. And in that case, they have a civil society group, Dig It Up, that's working in collaboration with the city to help reach out to organizations and say, hey, look, do you want to be, there's this open data thing we're doing, and do you want to be part of it? Do you want to share? Do you want to get data? And so that position of the sort of data liaison officer, I think, is definitely really key. And in San Sebastian as well, in Spain, they have, again, the city reaches out with their Smart Street, Smart Calea project. And there, the city goes to business people, often people who are not tech savvy and maybe even not even really digitally literate. And they invest a lot of time in speaking to them, in trying to get them to understand the data that's being collected in the city, and how can this enable you to improve your business. So you're right, putting the data out there and just expecting people to innovate, while that's an excellent first step, it shouldn't stop there. And some cities are, and all cities should be doing more to put it in the hands of people. You're totally right.
Oh, I'm glad to hear that, because I think that is part of the citizens' literacy, really, to know how to use and to take this opportunity, so that it isn't restricted just for the established big business or so.
Much agreed.
Okay. Zolt, you want to say something? Go.
Thank you very much. So thank you, Anthony, for this fascinating talk and a fascinating topic. I think there is definitely a discontinuity in between how a scientific interest and a business interest enter into the problem of smart data-driven solutions, such as smart cities or smart transportation. I had the opportunity lately in the past 2 years to do some psychological research on self-driving, and then there are these funny situations when we have we invent ways of gathering data from people who are passengers in self-driving cars, and then at some point we try to collaborate with leaders of self-driving technologies, and then there's always like this funny moment when they realize that as a scientist, if I wish to publish like in open source journals and things, then I have an obligation to share all my raw data and to share all the algorithms, the programs that we use to analyze the data, and that's an obligation. And they have, and then and try to negotiate with these folks who have an obligation to not share anything. They sign a contract that they are not going to share information. So then there we are, smiling at each other, and then okay, how are we going to work together? So really, I think the problem is that from a legislation point of view, you have to invent good examples and some kind of incentives for business people to actually get the idea of, okay, how they're going to be able to proceed and do something nice together with science folks. And then the university students are going to take care of how to make it public or how to I'm sorry if I was
no, you're very clear. I mean, we can always console them by saying, but no one is going to read these journals anyway. So what? No. I think the thing is, you're completely right. But the issue is not that we have to put incentives in place. I mean, of course, that doesn't hurt. But the thing is, the incentives are already there. They just have to be seen. I mean, if you have an ecosystem of open data, if all of these, for example, self-driving car companies can see the algorithms of all of the other self-driving car companies and can build, can go in leaps and bounds because they're all benefiting from each other's research, and the only one that's ahead is the one that's making the next cutting edge step on the pool of knowledge there. I mean, it's much better for the companies, it's much better for the people, and it creates, I mean, we'd already maybe all be in self-driving cars if that was the culture. It's not the culture at the moment because people are, I suppose, wary of each other, wary of free riders, things like that. So maybe legislation that could somehow lend buoyancy to that style of thought, I think would be really useful. But to share, and if everyone shares, is an enormous advantage, and we've seen that, for example, recently with vaccine research, things like that.
Yes, yes, you're completely right. Yeah.
So to make that the culture, I don't have the solution to that, but I think that's what needs to happen.
We have to work on it, and I really appreciate your.
And academics set a good example.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, Anthony, thank you so much. Sharing is the way, and making all cities intelligent and human friendly and human centered. It's a great thing.
Let's root for that.
Thank you
Thanks
so
a
much.
million, Isabel.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you so much, Anthony.